Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Today's briefing is going to be the last one that I make regarding the Shannon Sharpe situation, I swear. But the reason that I wanted to address it is because I think it dovetails perfectly with another situation that I've been meaning to speak on, and this is something that I want to direct at black men in specific. A while back, I talked about things that make a black man look weak. At that time, I profiled Hush Puppy, the Nigerian scammer, and the reason that I singled him out without making a big deal of him being an immigrant, you'll recall, I mainly talked about the guy just because of his own nefarious acts, but I focused on him because for all the money that the man stole and all the things that he bought, the one thing that he couldn't purchase was confidence in himself. This man was emotionally needy. And that's what brought him down. He was trying to be validated by everybody else. There was just this part of him that was so insecure, this part of him that was just so weak that he just had to make some sort of big deal of himself with everyone looking at him, even though he was a crook par excellence. We have a lot of black men who are feminine in their mentality. And you can tell because they spend the most time trying to prove to others how manly they are. They'll do this usually by being flashy or being the loudest and the wrongest. The hallmark of a man, especially a confident one, is that he doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. Show me the idiot who's constantly sitting here trying to tell you that he's this, that, and the third, and he wants you to believe that he's so above you. That is a guy who is broadcasting to the world that he is as fragile as glass, and they wind up the same way. Shannon Sharpe, this is another guy who thought of himself as being a real ladies' man. Oh, he's in his mid-50s, but the dude, he still keeps himself buff. He's in shape. The guy's running around like he's still 25 years old and lives on the Jersey Shore by the way that he dresses. And sure, he managed to parlay his NFL career into a broadcasting job or two afterwards, but the problem was those insecurities that he had with him where he was still trying to prove himself somehow. He carried that right along with him. And now what he's found out the hard way is something that as a black man he should have known all along. Trying to buy one's way out of a scandal, that only works if you're white, because it's only allowed to work if you're white. The white media goes ahead and allows all of that hoopla to die down if you're white, and they let all that stuff fade away. But if you're black, they never do, and that's the point. Believe it or not, I wouldn't necessarily categorize Shannon Sharpe as a coon, believe it or not, though he's put on the tap dancing shoes more than once and said some things that made me lose a lot of respect for him. Perhaps he thought that he was playing the game. A lot of these Negro celebrities, that's the way that they justify this stuff in their own minds. Whenever they sit there and make excuses for all of this anti-black racism, or they otherwise try to whitewash the blatant white supremacy. Now, Shannon Sharpe didn't make a career out of that. He actually gave some substantive pushback, but not nearly enough. White supremacy doesn't believe in black people ever winning the game. That's what these black celebrities never figure out. And that's why they get no sympathy, nor should they. Nobody is surprised that ESPN has cut ties with Shannon Sharpe. Well, maybe he is, but nobody else is. What, did he think that he was going to go ahead and give that little old settlement and they were going to sit there and say, oh, we got to put you on ice for a little while, Shannon, but don't worry, we'll bring you back, as if you were a white man. Was that how he thought this was all going to play out? Because apparently he spent way too much time at the local cheese and croissant parties up in the Hollywood Hills or what have you. Too much time hanging out at these NFL owners' homes, where they got no doubt all sorts of illicit activity going on, especially plenty of white women on hand. And some of these Negroes start thinking to themselves that they're on the team. And I ain't just talking about the NFL team. Yeah, but sooner or later, white power has a good chuckle at their expense, crashing them right back down to earth. He was thinking that if he made a settlement, this would all be allowed to blow over. He just didn't get it. He's as much a tool of the white media as a large number of those white men that he worked with, but in a different way. Because under white supremacy, a guy like him, a tool like him, he's more valuable to them disgraced and defamed than he ever would have been as an on-air personality. Oh yeah, ESPN, that $100 million contract, they didn't even bother to make out any freaking paperwork for it because they already knew we're never going to have to pay on it. What, he thinks his reputation wasn't already well known? Just like with Tiger Woods, they've had this information on these Negroes. They have it usually for years before they finally spring it. And here we all go, man, how long did they know about this? Oh, they knew about it all along. They know exactly how they're going to get you out the paint when the time comes. Just like with Joke Reed. They reminded her, they gave her a glimpse of how her future was going to go. A little scandal about some quote-unquote homophobic remarks that she had made on a blog back in the day. She denied it, claimed she was hacked, whatever. She thought to herself that she was saved. She found out in the end she wasn't. Now, we don't know whether the rumors are true that Shannon Sharpe allegedly has paid the accuser $23 million. which, by the way, is more than he made when he was in the NFL. And hey, if it's on the internet, that means it must be true, right? Obviously, I'm being sarcastic. Just because something is repeated often doesn't make it true. It just means it's being repeated a lot. We don't know how much Shannon Sharpe paid this accuser, and there's no actual proof for any figure. I myself said that if he paid anything over the mid-seven figures, he's a total moron, and while his incompetence is a given, we don't yet know if he's a total idiot, so we shouldn't be saying how much he spent, but the truth of the matter is, the fact that he even decided to do this at all, instead of going to court and actually fighting, which by the way is what Jay-Z threatened to do, and you saw how that turned out. But in Shannon Sharpe's case, they already knew that he feared white disapproval more than he did having to cough up this money. That's what causes this kind of behavior. A Negro who is more concerned about getting a disapproving look from a lot of those good white friends of his that he thought were his buddies, as opposed to whether or not he's going to actually stick up for his own reputation. He could either take the few blows that would come now or be totally crushed, and he's going to be totally crushed. That's his reality. That's weak. There's nothing particularly egregious about the accusations that were made against Shannon Sharpe, though you wouldn't know by the way he reacted. P. Diddy had far bigger legal problems than Shannon Sharpe ever did. And after the way that the feds made it a point to show what they could do with R. Kelly, you would have thought that maybe, just maybe, Diddy would go ahead and try to see if he could beg his way up on some sort of plea deal. But instead, the bad boy of hip-hop decided that he was going to dig in his heels and stand his ground. He decided to fight. R. Kelly's fate be damned. And what happened was, he actually faced down the worst of the charges against him. That's what happened in his case. P. Diddy of all people. And there's a man who I have no respect for. But it doesn't require me to like someone in order for me to be able to be intellectually honest enough to say, okay, I see what this guy did and I see why, and I can acknowledge the fact that it worked. And I would say in P. Diddy's case, it worked for the right reasons, which happened to be, he felt that the feds didn't have a case, he went into court, and he proved it. See, Bill Cosby also thought to himself that he could get the accusations to go away if he put out some money. Michael Jackson, same thing. They keep all using the same tactic with the exact same results. It's been a fact of anti-black racism that the fastest way to bring a black man down is to prove that he can't keep his pants up, at least accuse him of it. Yes, it's a trope. The accusations are almost always false, if not hideously overblown, and we shouldn't lend any support to the idea that there's anything basically valid to this kind of racist hysteria. My problem is that at some point, we have to ask why so many high-profile black men just keep stepping into the same old bear trap, tripping over their own egos. And why is it always revolving around some woman? Black men know that they're targets, and a lot of them talk about the measures that they take to avoid precisely this kind of thing. Shannon himself had some measures in place, but he didn't avail himself of them when this OnlyFans thought came around. And that was exactly what made it where this thought and whatever individuals may have been behind her, backing her up, made them look at Shannon Sharpe and go, oh yeah, this guy's ripe for a fall. When this man sits here and lets her talk all of that race play crap and put a big black baby in me, all of this disrespectful, low-key, anti-black crap that she was doing, and he's sitting there just going along with it. This idiot thinking to himself, oh, she's just so impressed that I'm so muscular and all the rest of this stuff. He's thinking to himself that he was in charge. She was leading him around by the nose. He painted himself as weak, and this is what happened. As soon as she understood, yeah, he's dancing to my tune, she stepped on him. And why not? Even with black men who made their names online, we've also seen similar scandals play themselves out. And by the way, I hope that in the comments section people can refrain themselves from mentioning names. I'm not trying to have grist for the mill. This is about the concept and the issue itself, not specific persons or personalities. But we've seen this in a number of places. A lot of these guys wind up in the same position. Bill Cosby thought to himself that he was America's dad, even though he had the first of his sex scandals in the early aughts. But that didn't stop him from immediately going back on tour and wagging his finger at the black community, pound cake and all the rest of that. Everybody knows by now a black man makes a name for himself, he's going to inevitably become a target. Shannon Sharpe, Jonathan Majors, Bill Cosby, Diddy, hell, even people like Herman Cain. And of course you even got some black men who came to prominence online. Same fate. A number of these black men who bragged about their own brilliance or their business savvy, and they felt that that somehow gave them the ability to go ahead and tell others how brilliant they thought they were, much smarter than everyone else, and yet inevitably they wound up being made to look like fools. And when it comes to character assassination of black men, the white media are absolute experts at it. God knows they've had enough practice. Just take your chosen target and make them the subject of unflattering headlines. They'll be humiliated, arrested, given mugshots in many cases, dragged into court, a couple of them winding up in prison for years, if not decades. And I'm deliberately being oblique because when you use names, people tend to get distracted and it turns into a gossip fest. I need people to hear me and to think. I'm trying to speak to the overall problem that a lot of black men have where they fall for the same trap over and over again. I'm not trying to add more grist to the gossip mill. The point is, when it comes to these types, there's almost always some mess involving a financial scandal of some sort or another, people who claim to be financial gurus, guys who claim that they had some big idea that they were attempting to get the funding for, women and money. When it comes to black men who wind up getting caught up, these two seem to be intertwined, and there's a reason for that. As a black man, I naturally understand how it is that we're constant targets. Seems there's no accusation that's too ridiculous for the white media to report on it as if it's holy writ. And there's no accusation too flimsy or too blatantly weak for the white media to decide to report on it as if it was already proven and confessed to. Ask Nate Parker about that one. But of course, there's a huge difference between being a teenage to early 20-something unknown jock who thought that he was going to have some gutter sex with some trailer trash, and a black male figure in his 30s, 40s, or in the case of Shannon Sharpe and others, in their 50s, who loves to remind everyone how brilliant they are, and yet all these guys keep lining up in the same position, and it's always due to the same thing, something involving a woman. Or in many cases, it's also presaged by these guys having some sort of financial dealings that clearly were questionable. Now, for the slow bus crowd, I'm not saying that any of this justifies the white media's racial jihad against black men, even against Shannon Sharpe. It doesn't. What I'm saying is every black man knows this is a dirty game the dominant society plays, but we also know that even without having some skank and her lawyer and the white media trying to set us up, there's more than enough examples I could point to of black men putting themselves behind the 8-ball. And a lot of these guys, even with all of this evidence that they are getting screwed over by the very same people who they thought were their buddies, they still try to see if they can find some sort of respectability politic way out of the mess that they put themselves into. Seems some of us find a way to do it even without the white media's help. So for these black men, be it Shannon Sharpe, be it Bill Cosby, be it Diddy, or whomever online person you can think of, these individuals who want to show that they're so savvy and so brilliant that either they know the way to navigate their way around white supremacy and anti-black racism, or they just think themselves too clever by half. If they want to show everybody how savvy and ahead of the curve they are and what wise guys they are, they can start by not putting themselves in messes like this. Show that they know the environment that they're in, and they understand how to avoid these traps, that they know their targets, and they know how to deprive the enemy or any opportunistic skank of the chance to take them down. How come these self-described successful black men just don't seem able to do that? Another character flaw that tends to go along with these kinds of people is lying. They lie a lot, especially to themselves. Now, sometimes they get caught out altogether, sometimes on air. Other times, the falsehoods and inconsistencies are pointed out after the fact. But either way, when this happens, they scream and yell and try to shout down the people who catch them, as opposed to changing the behaviors that got them exposed in the first place. You know, I heard that Prince, he would have people sign non-disclosure agreements if they were even allowed to set foot on his property. You see, there's a reason why Prince didn't wind up in those kind of situations. There's a reason why people didn't do that to him, because they couldn't. He was honest with himself about the situation that he was in. He was honest with himself that he was a target. This was a black man who made it very clear, you're going to play by my rules or we don't play at all. You see, Prince was not looking for approval from the dominant society. That's the reason why he didn't have a problem running around humiliating the former record label that he worked for. He wanted everybody to know exactly what was going on. And by the way, just for the record, Prince was heterosexual as they come. True, his fashion sense could use some common sense, but that didn't change the fact that he was definitely a ladies' man, mascara and nail polish be damned. Prince made it where he was in control, and he stayed in control. And everybody understood, well, you can try something with him, but it probably ain't gonna work. Yeah, that's because Prince wasn't playing by other people's rules. You had to play by his. There is no substitute for that. Yeah, it may be a lot more stressful, but not as stressful as letting the white powers that be set you up and jam you up. So Shannon Sharpe, he's lost the money. He's also lost whatever chance he thought that he was going to have that ESPN gig. And in the end, he wound up in the same position that he would have been in had he decided to go ahead and just go to court. Because whatever dirt it is, whatever embarrassing recordings there are that he thinks are going to stay buried, they're not. They didn't do this because they were trying to do him any favors. They did it precisely because this is about taking as much from him as possible. And the guy, he played right along with it. Seems for a certain type of black man, the more well-known they become, the bigger their heads get and the smaller their brains get. They cultivate a persona that's meant to radiate competence, but as we've seen repeatedly, they get tripped up by the same stupid thing. They just never learn. Now, I'm going to go ahead and close this out here, because truth be told, I'm not going to add on to any sort of pile-on of these figures, because that only serves to reinforce the white media narrative. But as black men, I hope that we can look at ourselves and ask some honest questions about whether or not we might be falling for the same kind of things. Are we setting ourselves up for the exact same types of issues? And for the black men who have, they need to look at themselves, and we need to look at them as well, and ask whether or not this is an individual who we ought to be yucking it up with if they make some jokes on their podcast, or individuals who we feel might say some things that we agree with, and yet we see the exact same behaviors from them. And sure, they may not wind up like R. Kelly doing 90 years behind bars or anything. But did Bill Cosby have to go to prison for anyone to look and say, you know what? Wrong as the prosecution was against him, he kind of set himself up for that one. Do we really have to go that far? Prince showed strength. Diddy, as little as I think of him, showed fortitude. Shannon Sharpe showed neither. That's the point. Even if you do fall into the trick bag, you better be realistic about how you're going to get out of it. Let's just hope that a few more of these black men who are so big and muscular, or so brilliant, or so savvy, or so charismatic, or what have you, let's hope that they actually learn from these kind of things before they become the next object lesson. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: David Williams, Johnny Galden, Stephen 12, Nora Brown, and Alan Reese. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.